As the bag says, one bag, countless uses. In today's episode, I'm going to give you one more of those countless uses. So let's go. What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. It is a beautiful late summer day, early fall day, however you want to look at it. It started out like fall, and it's kind of finishing like summer. I am so happy to be out in the garden today, and I'm really excited to talk about something that a lot of you asked me about, and that was our fall cucumbers. So about 4 weeks ago or so, we started from seed our fall cucumbers. They're behind me here, and they're growing very nicely. In fact, they're flowering and starting to fruit. But a lot of you asked how I grew them and kept them disease-free. Because true, if you just threw the seeds in the ground, same thing with zucchinis or any type of summer squash, if you threw those seeds in the ground, inevitably with the cold nights and the damp weather that you get in fall, you will definitely encounter things like powdery mildew. So to combat the powdery mildew, I wanted to show you what we do to keep them powdery mildew free. Now, it's not a guaranteed way to keep them powdery mildew free, but it's a very good preventative. And my approach is be preventative rather than reactive, right? So I would rather prevent them and do things slowly and methodically in the garden than to come out one day, have a huge outbreak, and then have to react, because then you're already kind of behind the curve. You already have to play catch up to get in front of the outbreak. And so I'd much rather take a preventative approach. All right, so before we get started with preventative measures for powdery mildew, I wanted to share with you a few facts and misconceptions about powdery mildew that you might not already know. So when it comes to powdery mildew, it is a soil-borne fungus. That means it's found in the soil and colonizes the leaf surface, which then can actually use the wind to spread its spores to other soil. So because of the fact that it's found in the soil, it's a common misconception that a lot of gardeners will think that they've either gotten tainted soil from an outside source and they want to blame like a landscaping company, or they use their soil as an excuse for why they have it and why they should have gone with an outside source, right? Like, oh, I should have bought new soil because I knew I couldn't trust the soil that I had. Or you go with an outside source as I knew I should have just used the soil that I had because now I went with an outside source and I got tainted soil, right? It is a lose-lose proposition, and a lot of gardeners play the blame game, and unfortunately that just ends up taking you down a path that is really going to be a dead end, because of the fact that powdery mildew is a soil-borne fungus. It is found in literally every single soil anywhere you look. That leads to the second misconception, is that a lot of gardeners say, okay, well, if I compost plant material that has had powdery mildew in the past in my compost pile, those spores will then colonize my compost, which will then basically taint all of my soil. When in fact, all of your soil is already tainted anyways. And so it's more about the growing conditions that the plants are being put under than the actual soil itself. You'll find powdery mildew spores in literally any soil, but it's about the growing conditions that you're growing these crops that allows the powdery mildew to proliferate. And so that leads me to the point of today's episode, which is just preventing it. You can prevent it on the surface of your leaves still while having it present in your soil. The two can coexist, right? Your plants can coexist powdery mildew free because of your actions, still while having powdery mildew in the soil. So powdery mildew is a fungus that colonizes leaves, but only if the leaf surface is the correct pH. Mildews and molds are very prone to pH imbalances. And so if you can swing the pH higher or lower from where it needs to colonize, you can actually actively control it very simply. And so what we're going to be using is baking soda, which will inevitably change the pH of the surface of the leaf to be slightly alkaline. And what that will do is that will actually change the pH of the leaf surface. As long as this is found on the leaf, it will actually change the pH of the leaf surface. Not so much that the plant will die, but enough that the powdery mildew can't survive or can't even colonize at all. And so we will do this every single week. We'll talk about this later, but we'll do this every single week so that we ensure that the leaf surface is always at a pH that cannot host powdery mildew. We will do this basically starting as early as possible. From the moment that the adult leaves have formed on our cucumber plants and our squash plants, we will start spraying. We do this basically as long as the plant is alive, and that's because anytime you let your guard down, the leaf surface pH can change because of dew landing on the leaf and washing off the baking soda solution, or rain coming and washing off the baking soda solution. And so because of that, you need to regularly apply this. It may seem like a lot of work, but the alternative is that you get it and it takes out your plant and then you don't get anything. So I prefer to put in a little bit of work because it's very, very simple. And once you make the spray up, it can stay in a spray bottle. It doesn't go bad, and you can just keep using it, as long as you need it. So I prefer to make up a 1 gallon jug of it. This is a big jug, but I only make about a gallon of it. And so I've got a gallon of water in here. Then I take 1 tablespoon of baking soda, just 1 tablespoon, and I put that into the container. You don't want to use more than a tablespoon, because if you are using this as a preventative measure, you want to make sure it's very gentle. If you already have powdery mildew, you can go up to 2 tablespoons, but just be aware that the more you change the pH, the higher the chance of actually stressing out the plant and ending up killing it. So you want to be very gentle when you're preventing it, right? We're not taking a drastic approach, we're taking a very gentle approach. So we have 1 tablespoon of baking soda, and then the secret is a couple drops of dish soap. I just use Dawn dish soap, it's what we got on hand, but I take a couple drops, and what that does is it allows the baking soda solution to stick onto the surface of the leaf a little bit longer. All right, so we went back, we sprayed the surface of all the leaves. It's really important to realize you don't need to spray the undersides of the leaves. Powdery mildew does not colonize the underside, it only colonizes the top. And one of the problems that a lot of gardeners face when spraying controlling powdery mildew is that they spray at the wrong time of the day. It is very, very important you spray before the heat of the day. It's about 9:30 in the morning right now. And so the sun has just come up, only about like an hour and a half ago or so, and we're well before the heat of the day. That's going to allow the leaves to dry before the heat of the day. Because if it gets hot and the sun comes out, you're actually going to end up risking burning your leaves, and that can actually kill them. So even if it's gentle like this, it's always best to spray in early morning when possible. And then also, a lot of gardeners will think that they have to follow up like every single day, every other day. It's not something you really should do, because you're going to end up over concentrating and over spraying. It's best to actually spray only about once a week. Now you can increase the concentration, but still only spray once a week. If you find that the spray is ineffective, or you're starting to see some powdery mildew and you're still using the 1 tablespoon, bump it up to like 1.5 tablespoons and see what happens. Bump it up to 2 and see what happens. You really shouldn't, and in most cases you really can't, go higher than 2 tablespoons to a gallon of water, because then you're going to start entering the level that's going to start killing the plants. So it's just one of those things where, again, you can prevent it, you can take these steps to actually control it, but sometimes even those steps aren't good enough. And so at that point, that's really where you say, look, what can I do better next year? Can I plant them at a different time next year? Was the season just a weird season? Was it really wet and really cold when normally it would have been really warm and really dry? Those things are things you have to ask yourself, because at a certain point, us as organic gardeners can only do what we can do. We can only do what's at our disposal. And those are the things you really have to start asking yourself if this is not working. But again, powdery mildew is not something you can control completely. It's not something you can completely eradicate. It's really just about kind of mitigating and keeping your plants in check, keeping the powdery mildew off of the leaves as much as possible for as long as possible. And if you do this, I think you're going to have great success in the garden. So when it comes to spraying things like copper fungicide and milk can leave a smelly residue when it dries on your plants, and copper fungicide can be fairly expensive. I use baking soda because it's just as effective, but everybody has it. It's super accessible and very inexpensive. So I just prefer to use this, but use what you feel that you trust, as long as it is changing the pH of the surface of the leaf, that's really all you're going for. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. If you did, make sure to throw a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. We have lots more videos coming out. Despite the fact the weather's cooling down, our videos are just heating up. So, all right, we'll talk to you guys later. As always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel, reminding you to grow big or go home. We'll catch you guys later. Bye.